Okay, back for part two. So I'm going to talk about several things along the lines of the last live. Um, so here is an article from 2017. Israel's, quote, dogs of war, another form of colonial violence. Guard dogs are kept in wooden boxes outside settlements across the West Bank for one purpose only, to attack Palestinians. Israel's 50-year occupation of the Palestinian territories has produced an array of images that convey the apartheid state's oppressive brutality. Not least among them is the separation wall, dividing the West Bank from occupied East Jerusalem, but also the prison walls that encircle and entrap Gaza's 2 million residents. Each restricts Palestinian access to land, denying them crucial services and stifling economic development. Both walls, alongside military checkpoints, military tribunals, detention centers, drones, tanks, and fighter jets, have all become synonymous with Israel's unjust and inhumane colonial project. But here's another cognitive image, and one that serves as a near perfect metaphor for Israel's violations of international law and human rights: settler dogs. Settler dogs, or, quote, dogs of war, as Palestinians refer to them, matter because the more than 600,000 illegal Israeli settlers who reside in the occupied West Bank remain one of many key obstacles to peace in this long running conflict. Put simply, if international pressure cannot push the settlers back beyond the pre 1967 borders, any version of a two state solution is unworkable. Facts on the ground. For those unfamiliar with the rolling hills of the West Bank, Israeli settlements come in all shapes and sizes, ranging from mini cities, complete with shopping malls and Olympic sized swimming pools, to outposts, comprising little more than a few dozen mobile homes. It is from these outposts, however, that illegal settlements become highly fortified towns and cities. But where the latter are protected by the Israeli military, occupants of the former must protect themselves by their own means. It is from these settlements that Israeli skillfully changes the facts on the ground to its own territorial advantage. The construction of outposts to seize and hold territory was a strategy implemented by Israel's founding fathers in the 1930s and nicknamed the Tower and Stockade approach, and was re-implemented 3 decades later as a strategy to occupy and colonize the West Bank immediately after Israel seized the territory in 1967. Everyone should take action, should run, should grab more hills, former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon once thundered, which is exactly what tens of thousands of settlers have done for much of the past 5 decades, seizing land that doesn't belong to them and then constructing makeshift homes throughout the West Bank. This is where settler dogs come into frame. The first time I visited an Israeli outpost, its residents gave me a tour of the compound. Situated approximately 30-minute drive from the center of Jerusalem, the front gate to this particular outpost looked like an attempt to turn an old highway toll booth into a pseudo-military checkpoint, which on this day was manned by heavily armed 23-year-old Jewish American kid from Florida. There is a lot of them in Florida. Uh, they live in America, have an American citizenship, and then go to Israel, terrorize Palestinians, aid in the illegal occupation of Palestinian land, kill Palestinian people, civilians, abuse them, and then come back to live in Florida. Like, it's actually insane. Behind him, a loose gravel driveway snaked its way to the top of the ridgeline. When you stand atop of the hill, you stand among 2 dozen mobile homes and trailers that house the outpost's 50 or so occupants. In the distance, and in all directions, you can see the unmistakable red-tiled roof lines of the larger Israeli settlements that strategically trace the Palestinian territory's hilltops. Midway down the hill, a series of wooden boxes are tied together by chains, each box located approximately 50 yards from the next. These 3 by 3 foot boxes trace the outpost's entire perimeter, each housing 2 guard dogs that are chained permanently to them. Should a Palestinian approach the perimeter, the dogs bark, serving an alarm for the residents to grab their guns. These are illegal occupiers, by the way. These people are illegally stealing and occupying land that does not belong to them and using dogs, okay, to terrorize, intimidate, and attack the indigenous people of the land. This scene is typical of every Israeli outpost settlement in the occupied West Bank, and it is every bit as inhumane and barbaric as you can imagine. Another settler dog training program boasted that their trained dogs could smell the difference between an Israeli settler and an, quote, Arab infiltrator, claiming, quote, the adrenaline of the Arabs, they can detect it. The Arabs are very scared of dogs. We don't want the dogs to kill Arabs, just immobilize them. I mean, like, is this not completely insane? Is this not the most racist, horrible thing you've ever heard? I mean, this is a violation of international law. This is I'm lost for words, to be honest. With an ever increasing number of Israelis illegally occupying the West Bank, bringing an ever increasing number of trained attack dogs, it's little wonder reports of Palestinians being attacked by settler dogs are also increasing in both frequency and ferocity. Palestinian kids as young as 5 years of age have suffered lifelong horrific injuries from these dogs. These attacks coincide with a pattern of overall increase in settler violence against Palestinians in the West Bank, with the number of attacks increasing by more than 30% year on year, according to a report published by the European Parliament. Worse, these dogs are not only being used to, quote, defend Israeli illegal settlements, but also for offensive purposes to intentionally attack Palestinian civilians. Amnesty International has observed these attacks, with or without the use of dogs, sometimes take place in the presence of is not really illegal occupation terrorists, soldiers, and police who fail to intervene. Of course, they fail to intervene. They encourage this. This is what this society wants. It's an illegal occupation, it's a genocide. Of course, they're not going to intervene. I have some people in my chat right now, which is nice. Okay, thanks everyone who does tune in and watch this stuff. It's difficult to talk about. It's unpleasant. I don't really enjoy talking about it, but I have to. I feel like I would be a hypocritical and a coward to not discuss this, especially as it relates to dog culture critique. Um, because, I mean, this is literally the worst of dog culture that we see. Dogs being used to attack children, intimidate, abuse, torture people, sexually assault people. I would be a coward and a hypocrite not to talk about it. Okay. Controversy over video showing Israeli soldiers setting a dog on Palestinian youth. Reminder, okay, the last article I just read was from 2017, I believe. I want to keep hammering this point. These aren't recent. I mean, this didn't just start to happen recently. October 7th is not when any of this began. It's before even 1948. Uh, the illegitimate colonial project called Israel, was founded on terrorism in the 1930s. Zionist movement has been around for a really long time. We're just seeing the current, actions, the current genocide is just the most recent of a long history of serious, serious criminal genocidal behavior. Okay. So this one is from 2015. Israeli army say they will investigate what they say is an isolated incident. Yeah. Rights groups have condemned a video showing Israeli soldiers holding a young Palestinian immobile while military dogs attack him. The incident is alleged to have occurred last December in the southern West Bank between the Palestinian village of Beit Umar and the illegal Israeli settlement known as pieces of shit that shouldn't be there. The video, which could not be verified, of course, appears to show a soldier holding a 16-year-old Hamza Abu Hashem by the arm while another urges two large dogs to bite him. One soldier is heard to say, "Who's the coward now?" as the dogs tear at the youth's clothes. Well, as always, you, Diaper Brigade Israeli terrorist forces, are the cowards. The video, filmed by a soldier and intended to be highly classified, was posted to Facebook by Michael Ben Ari, a right-wing member of Israel's parliament. The accompanying text, which has since been taken down, praised the soldiers for, quote, getting rid of the terrorist, in reference to, remember, a 16-year-old Palestinian boy who was throwing rocks, according to them. The 16-year-old, who was treated in the hospital for his injuries, was subsequently sentenced to 6 months in prison and a fine of 4,000 shekels. This is the way that these terrorists treat the indigenous Palestinian people and have for decades. And dogs are a tool they use heavily. They import the dogs from Europe, okay? These are literally attack dogs. And they use them against children, women, disabled people, um, civilians, all the time. Hashem's father told the Israeli news site Haaretz that he first saw the video on Monday and had been shocked. Quote, "I do not know of any mother or father in the world would be indifferent to those images. It hurt us a lot. The child was helpless, and the soldiers were celebrating it." The Israeli occupation illegitimate army issued a statement after the video was circulated, promising that an investigation will be opened. Yeah, right. I'm sure that it was not. Quote, "It would be a mistake to draw conclusions before the end of the investigation. However, there is no doubt this is a serious incident." Yeah. The Israeli military halted the use of dogs during demonstrations in 2012 after a Palestinian protester was badly injured. However, the army continues to use dogs during arrests. An Israeli rights group, B'Tselem, said in a statement on Monday that, quote, "The video reflects in general the way the military uses dogs during arrests." So this is common practice. This is normal for them. This case happened to be caught on video, so they did some, BS like, "Oh, we condemn this." Damage control, but of course they don't condemn this. This is just the way they do things. Um, According to the group, the arrest using dogs was likely ordered by, quote, "the higher echelons of the is not really a legitimate occupation military," although the army expressed concern on Monday after the video was posted. But Salim urged the army to halt the policy of using dogs during arrests, which it described as, quote, "horrifying." All right, we want to talk about horrifying. Here is an even earlier story from 2012. IDF, or IOF, I should say, Israeli occupation forces, release attack dog on unarmed Palestinian protesters. An attack dog released on unarmed Palestinians by is not really security occupation forces sank its teeth into the arm of a Palestinian man and refused to release it for several minutes. Here is the image of that happening. Soldiers released an attack dog on unarmed Palestinians at a Friday anti-occupation demonstration in the West Bank village of Kufr Kadum, report eyewitnesses that include an AP photographer. According to a report from Jonathan Pollock, a political activist, border police officers released an army dog at a group of protesters who were standing several dozen meters away. The dog chased the protesters, then locked his jaw on the arm of one of them, Ahmad Shtawi, sinking his teeth into the man's arm. The dog refused for several minutes to respond to the handler's order to release Mr. Shtawi's arm. Although he was bleeding, in pain, and in need of medical attention, soldiers decided to arrest Mr. Shtawi after the dog finally released his arm. When Murad Shtawi, a member of the village's popular committee, tried to reason with the commanding officer and convince him to release the wounded man, he was thrown to the ground, handcuffed, and pepper sprayed. Again, this is the behavior of the illegitimate occupation colonial force of the Israeli terrorist state. Again, the Israeli human rights NGO B'Tselem has called several times for the army to stop using attack dogs on unarmed Palestinians, but this is common practice. They reported 5 other such incidents in 2011. Okay, I think that's the end of this article. Again, I mean, I could do a stream for hours and hours and not even cover a fraction of the examples of this. This is from 2018. I think, as I previously mentioned, a lot of these attack dogs are literally imported by the Israeli terrorist forces to be used against Palestinians from Europe. Okay. A Palestinian from the occupied West Bank is suing the Dutch company that supplied the dogs is not really terrorist forces used to attack him when he was a child. For more than 20 years, Four Winds Canine, a company based near the city of Nijmegen, has annually provided the Israeli illegal occupation forces with dozens of dogs trained to attack civilians. The military dogs are, quote, intentionally used by Israeli occupying forces to terrorize and bite Palestinian civilians, especially during protests and night house raids, according to Shawan Jabaran, director of the human rights group Al Haq. This cruel tactic is reminiscent of how police in the US and apartheid South Africa set attack dogs on black citizens demanding their rights. Yes, as I said multiple times, and again, I would be a complete hypocrite and a coward to do uh, streams and videos about the slave dogs that were used to hunt down runaway slaves, the dogs that were set against civil rights activists in the United States, black people, fighting for their rights, and not talk about the Palestinian issue. I will not be a coward and avoid this issue. Um, yeah, I don't care. It is part of dog culture critique. It should be one of the front lines of dog culture critique, frankly, because I don't know of anywhere else in the world where these trained attack dogs are being used on civilians, children, pregnant women, disabled people to the extent that the colonial occupation forces are using them during their ongoing genocide of Palestinians. I mean, what more of an example of dog out of control dog culture and dogs being used as weapons could there be than this? In 2015, Four Winds Canine co-owner Tani Bojan boasted in the newspaper NRC that 90% of the dogs used by the Israeli occupation forces were trained by his company. Lawmakers called on Lilian Plouwman, the Dutch trade minister at the time, to halt the export of the dogs. Plouwman said she wanted to end the trade as well, but saw no legal basis for a ban. Instead, Plouwman engaged with Four Winds Canine, urging the company to respect the UN guiding principles on business and human rights in conflict zones. As a result, the company announced in June 2016 that it was no longer providing Israel with, quote, biting dogs, but only tracking hounds. We had no intention to violate human rights, company co owner Linda Bojan told NRC. Yeah, right. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Imagine saying that, oh, we're not giving them biting dogs anymore, just tracking hounds. Like, are you claiming these so-called tracking hounds like don't bite? Like, give me a break. Do they think we're idiots? Give it to him, son of a bitch. But that was not the end of the story. Hamza Abu Hashem, a Palestinian victim of two Dutch attack dogs, filed a civil lawsuit against Four Winds Canine and its directors in the Netherlands last December. On December 23, 2014, Abu Hashem, then 16, was attacked by two Israeli army dogs and suffered serious injuries. There had been confrontations between Israeli occupation forces and residents of Abu Hashem's village of Beit Omar, in an area where Palestinian youths frequently protested the seizure of the village's land for the nearby settlement. Again, reminder, these are illegal settlements. They are these, like in the last article I read, a, a Jew from Florida was going to Palestine to help the Israeli occupation seize Palestinian land. Like, these are illegal settlements. They're stealing land from Palestinians and then using imported dogs, attack dogs, to attack them while they are protesting this illegal land seizure. Okay. According to a brief by Lisbeth Zegveld and Lisa Komp, attorneys with human rights firm Kraken de Oliveira, who are representing Abu Hashem, Israeli soldiers arrived with two canines and unleashed them on the youths. The dogs chased Abu Hashem and grabbed him in a yard between two houses. In an attack caught on video, the dogs bit him multiple times in the legs, arms, and shoulder. These camera images show that Israeli soldiers initially stood by taunting Hamza while watching the dogs bite him and hearing him scream in agony. After Hamza was bitten multiple times, the dogs were finally pulled off him and he was arrested by the soldiers. The video of the incident, filmed by one of the soldiers and published by the human rights group B'Tselem, shows the child crying out in pain while the soldiers can be heard shouting, "Give it to him, son of a bitch," and "Who's afraid?" According to B'Tselem, Michael Ben Ari, a right-wing former Israeli lawmaker, had posted the video on Facebook. This was mentioned in the previous article I read. A summons filed by Abu Hashem's lawyers state that Ben Ari wrote on Facebook, quote, "The soldiers taught the little terrorist a lesson." Okay, again, reminder that this is a common view in Israeli society in general, and their politicians and lawmakers openly express this view that every Palestinian is a terrorist. They're like subhuman, they are animals, and such. That's why they can justify treating them in these ways. The summons notes that after watching video of the attack, director Tony Bojan confirmed to NRC in 2015 that the dogs were supplied by his company. Abu Hashim's lawyers argue that Four Winds Canine acted wrongfully towards him. See, this is what I'm saying. Like, this is the kind of lawsuit. I know this is old, so I'm just using it as an example. Why wouldn't dog critics support this sort of action? Like, the suppliers of trained dangerous attack dogs should be sued for violating human rights and international law. They say the company knew or should have known that dog attacks in the occupied West Bank are part of a settled practice. The Israeli army regularly unleashed its dogs against Palestinian civilians. Yes, I've been saying this as a dog culture critic for basically since I started doing this. They argue that the dog attacks breach Israel's obligations under the Fourth Geneva Convention to protect civilians in occupied territory. According to the lawyer's brief, the dogs supplied by Four Winds Canine enable Israel to, quote, "enforce its authority over the Palestinian territories and to continue its policy of unlawful Israeli settlements." The lawsuit demands damages for Abu Hashem and that the Dutch firm be prohibited from supplying dogs to the Israeli army. Four Winds Canine claims that only the Israeli army is responsible for the damage caused by the use of the dogs. But Abu Hashim's lawyers respond that the company has, quote, an independent duty of care to ensure that it does not contribute to injuring Abu Hashim or to maintaining, quote, a situation in breach of international humanitarian law and fundamental human rights. The company also argues that the export of the dogs did not violate any specific laws or regulations and therefore it cannot be liable. The lawyers counter that its conduct would still violate, quote, what according to unwritten law has to be regarded as proper social conduct as defined in Dutch civil code. The lawsuit against Four Winds Canine sets a clear example that companies involved in Israel's violations of international law and Palestinian human rights can be held accountable. I'm going to look this up later and see what the outcome of this case was. I don't know what happened. This case has the potential to set an important precedent. Please keep. I agree. I'm gonna try to find out more about this. Okay. Here's a more recent story from February of 2024. Israel occupation forces unleash attack dog on 4-year-old Palestinian boy. 4-year-old Ibrahim Hashash is being treated for internal and external injuries following Israeli forces releasing a military dog onto the Hashash family apartment on the morning of February 4th, 2024, in the northern occupied West Bank. I wonder where this attack dog came from. This is 2024. Are these still Dutch attack dogs? Israel occupation forces unleashed an attack dog on a 4-year-old Palestinian boy in the northern occupied West Bank this week, Defense for Children International Palestine reported. Israeli forces released a military dog into the Hashash family apartment the morning of February 4th after carrying out an arrest operation in the Balata refugee camp near Nablus in the northern occupied West Bank, according to documentation collected by the rights group. The dog ran into the apartment and began attacking 4-year-old Ibrahim Hashash after knocking him out of his mother's arms. The dog tore off Ibrahim's clothes and repeatedly bit him on the lower half of his body as he bled profusely. The attack continued for about 3 minutes before the Israeli occupation forces entered the apartment and removed the dog from Ibrahim. An ambulance brought Ibrahim to Rafidia Hospital in Nablus, where he is being treated for internal and external injuries. Israeli forces routinely show complete disregard and often contempt for Palestinian children's lives and safety, said Ayad Abu Aktash, Accountability Program Director at DCIP. In a hyper-militarized environment where systemic impunity is the norm, kids like Ibrahim will increasingly be targets. Ibrahim will remain in the hospital until he receives plastic surgery to repair his injuries, according to medical information collected by DCIP. The dog made frightening sounds while biting Ibrahim, and blood was flowing heavily as he screamed and cried intensely, said Ibrahim's mother, who was unable to get the dog off her child. Israeli occupation forces systematically use military dogs to attack Palestinian civilians, including children, during military incursions into Palestinian cities and towns. Here's another case where they documented actually 4 cases in 2023 where Palestinian children were attacked by Israeli military dogs. These cases included a 13-year-old boy in Tulkarem, a 14-year-old girl in Jenin, and 2 siblings aged 8 and 12 in Tubas. Again, this is systematic. This is normal behavior for the occupation forces. They view Palestinians as animals. They want to genocide them so they can steal the rest of their land. Here is another story from June of 2024. Israeli army dog mauling of Gaza woman exposes, quote, canine weaponization. Again, this has been ongoing for decades. Here, this image, okay, is from 2009, where the Israeli occupation terrorist forces were patrolling East Jerusalem neighborhood of Ras Al Amud with these dogs that are meant to terrorize, intimidate, attack, harm, maul, kill Palestinian civilians. I have the footage of this. I don't know if I'm going to show it on this stream or not. It's obviously very disturbing. Um, so this is again referring to the that canine unit Oquette's, uh, where they were sending in dogs, strapped with gas as on like a suicide mission, basically. Um, let's see if this mentions. Is this still coming from the Four Winds canine? It sounds like that these dogs might still be coming. Oh, okay. Interesting. So this mentions that case we were just going over. So apparently the company agreed to compensate Hamza Abu Hashim for the injuries he suffered at the hands of the Israeli occupation forces that were using the dogs that they got from this Four Winds canine, attack dog training facility. So that's interesting. So they clearly either lost the case or decided to settle. They still deny legal liability. See, this is confusing because they're claiming the Israeli army trained the dogs, but I thought that their facility is training the dogs and then shipping them. So I don't really believe any of them saying that they're not responsible, they didn't train the dogs. I think they know very well what the dogs are being used for. I think they know very well what the dogs are being trained to do. I think that's just another example of dog nutters, a dog culture being very anti-human in general. I mean, you cannot convince me these dog nutters don't know that their dogs are being used to violently aggress against people. That's what they're for. Like, I don't know. These people are just so dishonest. Okay. This is also an older story. Looks like from 2023, September. Doesn't look like I'm going to be able to read the full article, but essentially, uh, these Israeli occupation forces, using attack dogs, forced five female Palestinians to undress while being threatened and terrorized by these occupation forces and their dogs. So it says two masked Israeli women soldiers with rifles and an attack dog forced five female members of a Palestinian family to strip naked, each one separately, in the West Bank city of Hebron. And these terrorist soldiers threatened to release the dog if the women did not comply. So again, just countless example after example of these dogs being used to terrorize Palestinian people. Here's another account of the Israeli occupation forces using a dog to attack a toddler near Jenin. This is from this year. 3-year-old Omar Ziad Ismail Abu Talib was attacked by an Israeli military dog in early November near Jenin, according to documentation collected by Defense for Children International. A 3-year-old child, guys, come on. Like, where is dog culture critique? You know what I mean? Like, is this not the most horrifically blatant example of these, what people are using dogs for and what dogs are capable of? They're saying things like dogs can smell the fear on Arabs. I mean, Israeli occupation terrorist forces deployed a military dog to attack a 3-year-old Palestinian boy in the northern occupied West Bank in early November. Omar Ziad Ismail Abu Talib III sustained severe injuries after being attacked by an Israeli military dog during a raid on his family's residential building in the Palestinian town of Kabatia near Jenin in the northern occupied West Bank. The occupation forces broke down the family's front door, unleashed a military dog that bit Omar on his left shoulder, causing extensive wounds, and refused to let go. Despite repeated pleas from the family, these terrorist occupation forces delayed intervention for about 5 minutes. Even after the dog eventually released the 3-year-old child, soldiers further delayed access to medical aid. The Isn't terrorist occupation forces routinely use attack dogs to terrorize and maim Palestinian children. Both the companies that sell these dogs and countries that allow for their export are complicit in Israel's genocidal crimes against Palestinian children like Omar. Omar was hiding with his family in their kitchen amid explosions and gunfire of an Israeli terroristic incursion into the Palestinian town of Kabatia on November 5th. Around 6:30 p.m., they forcefully entered the family's apartment building, broke into their apartment, released a military dog, which attacked the 3-year-old child while his father held him in his arms. The dog bit down on Omar's shoulder and refused to release him for several minutes, even as his father and mother pleaded with the soldiers to intervene. This is terrorism. Okay, this is terrorism. These Israeli occupation forces are engaged in terrorism. They use dogs to commit terrorism. They use dogs to commit atrocities against children and civilians all the time. Okay? I don't know how else to put it. My son Omar, who is 3.5 years old, tried to push the dog away from him with his hand in a childish way, but to no avail, recounted Omar's mother, Hanan. I was screaming and I was worried about Omar, especially since he was alone after the soldiers forced his father to leave him. Omar's father attempted to remove the dog, but was met with orders at gunpoint from Israeli terrorist forces to release his hold of his son. The soldiers continued to threaten the family and stood by as Omar remained trapped under the dog. Eventually, the dog released Omar, leaving him bleeding and in shock. After the attack, an Israeli terrorist occupier, identifying himself as a doctor, briefly examined Omar, noting severe wounds from the dog bites but providing no treatment. The family was instructed to call an ambulance. The terrorist forces then forced the family to evacuate on foot, walking over a kilometer with Omar bleeding from his shoulder as the Israeli terrorists blocked the ambulance's access. Once they reached the ambulance, a Palestinian paramedic sterilized Omar's wounds before transferring him to Jenin Governmental Hospital, where he received antibiotics, anti-rabies medication, and radiological exams to assess the extent of his injuries. Israeli terrorist forces systematically used military dogs to attack Palestinian civilians, including children, during military incursions into Palestinian cities and towns. Okay, yeah, so I mean, this article is still referencing that Dutch uh, attack dog supplier, Four Winds Canine. So I assume they're probably still supplying this illegal occupation force with attack dogs. Under international law, businesses and corporations have a duty to conduct heightened due diligence when engaging with countries like Israel, an occupying terrorist colonial project, to ensure that they are not complicit in the supply of tools of violence, such as military dogs, that directly contribute to human rights violations and breaches of international laws. Companies like Four Winds Canine continue to disregard these duties, instead reinforcing the illegitimate terrorist colonial state of Israel's violent settler colonial regime with more tools with which to terrorize, attack, and control Palestinian children. Yeah, okay, so apparently this Four Winds Canine place paid off one of their victims from what was that, like 2016, but continued to supply the occupation with dangerous, trained attack dogs. Interesting. Okay, so let's read through this. Unleashing Terror: Dutch Dogs and Israel's War Crimes from April of this year. From Gaza to the West Bank, from Palestinian homes to Israeli detention centers, Palestinians have shared horrifying testimonies of dog attacks by the Israeli occupation force. These testimonies demonstrate the Israeli occupation force's systematic use of dogs to brutalize Palestinians, including children, elderly people, and medical staff, sometimes with fatal consequences. SOMO discovered that police dog companies in the Netherlands obtained the required veterinary certificates for the export of at least 110 dogs to the illegitimate state of Israel between October 2023 and February 2025. So just in like a 2-year period, they sent 110 of these trained attack dogs. 100 of these certificates were granted to the company Four Winds Canine, a police dog training center in the southern Dutch village of Geffen. Four Winds Canine has a decades-long history of exporting dogs to is not real. This history is tainted by unlawful dog attacks perpetuated by is not really soldiers against Palestinians. SOMO obtained leaked documents relating to a past lawsuit against Four Winds Canine. They show how the illegitimate is not really occupation government went to great lengths to protect its supplier. Reports from human rights organizations, media, and the United Nations show that the attack suffered by Hamza in 2014 is just one example of a systematic pattern of abuse, whereby the Israeli occupation forces frequently use dogs to threaten and attack civilians, including toddlers, the elderly, and persons with disabilities. Dogs are also used to torture imprisoned Palestinians, including, according to media reports, through rape, which we covered earlier. They are using dogs to sexually assault detainees as one of the forms of torture that they use against Palestinian civilians. SOMA received 16 victim and witness testimonies collected by Palestinian human rights organizations Al Haq and Al Mizan, describing different types of dog attacks by the is not really occupation forces since October of 2023. These testimonies paint a gruesome picture of the ways in which dogs are used to brutalize Palestinian civilians. The export of military dogs is largely unregulated and falls under the same administrative procedures as the exporting or moving abroad of domesticated household pets. That's insane. So trained, dangerous, weaponized attack dogs are treated the same as pets. And people keep these things as pets. This is why dog culture needs to confront this issue in particular, because I think it's such an important example of dog culture itself. They view and treat deadly weapons on four legs as equivalent to pets. And oftentimes, these police handlers, at least in the US, keep these trained weaponized attack dogs as pets in their own homes. And we've seen in the like the Marshall Project documents cases where these trained police dogs in the US literally will attack their own handlers or escape and attack the first person they can come across. So it's wild to me, but unsurprising, that these police dog training companies like this Four Winds Canine, what's it called? Four Winds Canine, uh, are allowed to just export dangerous weaponized dogs as if they're pets, like with the same administrative procedures as just household pets. The 2014 attack against Hamza brought national media attention to Four Winds Canine and led several Dutch parliamentarians to call for an immediate halt to the export of dogs to the Israeli occupation army. This prompted the Dutch government to explore a dual-use export license regime applicable to dogs set for export to Israel. Under such a system, goods and animals that can be used for both civilian and military purposes would require an export license, with the state assessing the human rights risk of such exports before granting a license. Just stop and think about that for a second. Dogs are such a dangerous weapon and a tool of oppression, a tool of occupation, a tool of war, that they need an evaluation on the risk that these dogs are going to violate human rights in occupied Palestine before they're exported. They're being exported specifically to be used as a tool and a weapon of oppression and occupation. But they're treated as pets. Despite the clear human rights risks, the Dutch government decided not to introduce such a licensing regime. Even today, the Dutch government remains reluctant to address the risk of Dutch dogs being used in unlawful attacks by the Israeli occupation forces. Somo asked the Dutch Customs Authority for an aggregated and anonymized breakdown of export figures of dogs exported to Israel, specifically the Israeli Ministry of Occupation and Terrorizing Palestinian People, by private actors and, if applicable, the Dutch Ministry of Defense. The Customs Authority responded to Somo in an email on February 17, 2025, saying that it could not share this information due to, quote, privacy regulations. So they are allowed to, with no oversight, export hundreds of trained attack dogs that are used to then terrorize and attack and maul Palestinian 3-year-olds. It's completely sick. However, Somo was able to obtain information from the Netherlands Food and Consumer Product Safety Authority, showing that between October 2023 and February 2025, the NVWA issued 110 veterinary certificates, 14 required for the export of dogs by Dutch military police dog companies to Israel. Of these 110 certificates, 100 were issued to Four Winds Canine, who we already know has been identified as being the source of dogs that were used to maul Palestinian civilians. Another 4 certificates were issued to Police Dog Center Holland, which we know what those dogs are being used for, and 6 were issued to K10 working dogs, which we can guess what those are being used for as well. On March 17, 2025, Somo approached Four Winds Canine, Police Dog Center Holland, and K10 Working Dogs for information about 1. The identity of their Israeli purchasers, 2. The usage of dogs by these purchasers, 3. How they ensure their dogs are not used in international law violations, and 4. Whether they ever received information from the Dutch government before or after October 7, 2023, about the legal risks of supplying police dogs to Israel. To date, none of the companies have responded to Somo's inquiries. Of course, they know they are complicit. Under Dutch law, companies and corporate leaders exporting dogs to the Israeli occupation forces can be held criminally liable when their supply of dogs enables and/or exacerbates war crimes or acts of genocide committed by the Israeli occupation forces. But there are also clear legal obligations for the Dutch state to prevent that dogs exported from the Netherlands are used in violations of international law by Israel. Man, this is interesting stuff. This is powerful things. This is something that dog culture critique should definitely be addressing. I actually didn't know a lot of this until tonight, so I'm kind of learning some of this live right now. Here is another article from this year. of about these military dogs from the Netherlands being used to attack and torture Palestinians. They often occur during military raids on homes, hospitals, and shelters, especially in the Gaza Strip. The Netherlands' ongoing export of military dogs to the Israeli occupation forces, despite clear evidence of their use in the torture and intimidation of Palestinians, poses a serious risk of violating international law. Just think about this for a second. Dogs are literally the weapon being used, or I mean, one of the weapons being used by an occupying force to violate human rights and international law. Dogs are being used in ways that violate human rights and international law. The Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor reported that its field team has documented multiple cases in which Israeli forces used trained attack dogs to attack Palestinian civilians, including children, the elderly, and the ill. These attacks often occurred during military raids on homes, hospitals, and shelters, especially in the Gaza Strip. The organization said that the use of attack dogs by Israeli forces is systematic, forming part of a broader policy of abuse and intimidation. In this context, the Netherlands' role in supplying dogs and related equipment constitute a clear breach of international humanitarian law. The monitor expressed deep concern over findings from the Center for Research on Multinational Enterprises, which revealed that Dutch companies secured veterinary certificates to export 110 dogs to isntreal between October 23 and February 25, which we covered just a minute ago in the previous article. And of course, this Four Winds canine we know is heavily involved and has been involved for many years now, supplying. So they know and continue to violate international law and human rights. That's actually insane. And they get away with it partially because dog nut culture allows the continued use of dogs as weapons, and because people are too, I don't know, don't want to talk about Palestine. For years, the Netherlands has supplied trained police dogs to Israeli forces used in operations targeting Palestinian communities. The dogs have been deployed during violent raids with documented cases of attacks on civilians, including women and children. Okay, this is the footage that I don't think I will show of the dog attack on the elderly Palestinian woman that was caught on camera. I might fast forward through. My computer is like glitching. Okay, so the attack was captured on camera. I'm gonna skip through that just because it's hard to watch. And then
أنا الحاجة دولة عبد الله الطناني من مخيم جباليا، ومالش علي يعني أطلع من بيتي ولا أهجى بيتي. فشفت الكلاب طلقوا الكلاب علي ومعظني وأنا نايم في الفراش، سحبني من الفرشة من الباب من باب الأوضة وطلقاه. وأنا أصبت خطيرة، لا في مستشفيات ولا في أي حاجة. حتى الآن بعاني من إيدي، يهود طلقوا الكلب علي، مسك من ايدي وعض يدي كلها، والحين بعاني من ايدي، اصبت خطيره، ما في مستشفيات ولا في دوريات.
it's just horrible.
أنا تحية حسن العريان، عمري 34 سنة، سكان شرق خان يونس، حي المنارة. كنا أمنين في بيتنا. فجأة توغل جيش الاحتلال الإسرائيلي في 24 أكتوبر 2024. تم محاصرتنا في المكان أنا وزوجي في وأفراد عائلتنا. أطلقوا علينا اليهود الكلاب، وتم دخول علينا كلب. طبعا وكنت حامل في الشهر التاسع، عدى علينا الكلب. طبعا صار أول حاجة مسك أختي وشلحها خمر الصلاة، بعدين مسك في فخدتي وصار يسحب فيا من حمام للممر لحد ما نهش لحد ما طلع اللحم من جسمه.
هلا احكي لي، انت قلتي لي كبير حجمه؟
الكلب طبعا هو كبير طول وعرضه في العرض مسكر باب ايش، مسافة باب الحمام الألمنيوم. كنا واحنا نشيد فيه لا انت عارفة تشديه لا من راس ولا من رجليه، بتشدي فيه فيش مساحة انه يطلع الكلب او تزقيه شقة تانية. ضخم كبير، وهو الرجلين الخلفية عند باب الحمام، وراسه وين على الحمام من جوا. انه انا قاعدة عند اول الحمام وبنتي ورايا وابني وسلفي واختي على الحمام من جوا براسه، شد اختي بخمارها، ورجليه وين كانوا عند باب الحمام. طبعا شلحها خمار الصلاة، كنت عمرها 17 سنة وحامل. وكنت طبعا والله انا اللي كنت خايفة عليها يصير فيها اشي، انها بتخاف من اقل حاجة، لو صرصور لو نونة بتخاف منه، خايفين عليها يسوي فيها حاجة. او طبعا شلحها طنورة، هي واقفة شلحها طنورة وشرد فيها. اقول الحمد لله هي طلع. بدنا نسكر باب الالمنيوم، لو انه براسه خمع باب الالمنيوم وعدى تاني. اول ما شافني انا مسك في رجلي.
I wonder if this dog was one of the Four Winds canine dogs that was imported to be used in this manner.
وقعد ينهش فيها لقيصر، وعديت عملية. طبعا خلصت العملية وطلعوني. لفت انتباهي ان انا شفت ابني، بس انه مش قادرة. البنج انه صح نصف، لكن انه مغيبة شوية مش قادرة. طلعت على الغرفة وطول الليل وطلبوا طبعا أواعي للمولود، نزل حي. طبعا المية كانت بأثر من أثار العضة، كانت المية على الجنين مايلة للخضار. تسمم الحمل، يعني لو كان الجنين عنده 70% انه يعيش، مع عضة الكلب والتسمم ورجلي اللي التهبت بزيادة، ما كانش انه امل انه يعيش. لحد قعد في الحضانة، وطلبوا طبعا أواعي وطلبوا بامبز انه يودوا للحضانة. الصبح لو انهم بيقولوا لنا الجنين توفى. وطبعا ومن ساعتها وانا ايش بدي اسوي، يعني مش قادرة. حتى بيتي من اثار المكان الحادثة، وحتى لو حد جاب لي كمان سيرة بيت اقول لا مش قادرة. افرض عدوها علينا تاني، افرض رجعوا اليهود تاني، انا خايف. انا الصوت كمان اقل رجة، صوت زنانة، صوت طيارة، تحت الاصوات. لو حد جر كرسي كمان، الخوف مسيطر علي. ان انا اخذت رجة، البيت اخذها كله، بس انا اخذت الاكثر انه كانت ايش، عضة الكلب وهو ماسك.
They are terrorizing Palestinian civilians with dogs, many of which are imported from the Netherlands, to be used in this way. Four Winds Canine is complicit. They know what they are breeding and training these dogs for. They know what the dogs are being used for in Palestine, and they continue to export them. And they're only required to do the same paperwork as though these weapons of oppression are household pets.
ماسك وبنهش في رجلي وبشد، ووفى كمان انه جنيني كمان توفى. هو اللي اثر علي، وأنا مش قادرة أسوي حاجة، مش قادرة بشد رجلي إنه يسيبني يعمل، مش قادرة.
You could hear, by the way, the entire time in the background of that video, the drones that are continuously flying over Gaza. Israeli drones constantly. The noise is constant. This is the situation these people are living under.
There is a gang of soldiers, Israeli soldiers in Gaza, who set their dog loose on a Palestinian man who's autistic and had Down syndrome and was 24 years old, and his name was Mohammed Bahar. Okay? And this is reported now in a million outlets. You can find it everywhere. It's even the BBC had to cover it. But the headline, of course, is very, it downplays the whole thing. This is Mohammed Bahar, okay? I'm going to read to you from the article, and you can see how awful this is. The Israeli military has admitted that a Palestinian man with Down syndrome who was attacked by an army dog in Gaza was left on his own by soldiers after his family had been ordered to leave. Mohammed Bahar was found dead by his family a week
Is this dog another Dutch canine?
later. Responding to the BBC, the Israeli army said the troops left Mohammed Bahar alone because soldiers injured in a rocket attack needed their help. Okay, so you left him to die. That's what you did. So this is what happened. On June 27, the Israelis came to his neighborhood, okay, and they went into their house and, so on 3rd of July, the IDF raided their house on Nazaz Street. His mother said there were several dozen soldiers with a combat dog. Animals used to find Hamas fighters. They got to throw in the word Hamas, to justify murdering people with Down syndrome. So his mother...
Yeah, and they conveniently, again, leave out... I want to know, is this another Dutch dog? Was this dog imported to be used to maul to death a disabled Palestinian civilian in his own home?
Heard them, quote, breaking in and smashing everything, and then they arrived with the dog. Referring to Muhammad, she says, I told them that he's disabled. Have mercy on him. He's disabled. Keep the dog away from him. Then she saw the animal attack Muhammad. The dog attacked him, biting his chest, then his hand. Muhammad didn't speak, only muttering, no, no, no. The dog bit his arm and the blood was shed. I wanted to go get him, but I couldn't. No one could get to him. And he was patting the dog's head, saying, enough, my dear, enough. In the end, he relaxed his hand and the dog started tearing at him while he was bleeding. At this point, says Nabila, the soldiers took the young man into another room and away from the dog. They tried to treat his wounds. He was now in the care of combat soldiers who had come from the streets where Hamas. I'm sorry, the sentence is he was now in the quote-unquote care, or rather mistreatment, of people who just let a fucking dog maul him. Who wrote this shit?
Exactly. It's so infuriating. It's so infuriating the way these things are reported. It's infuriating in the same way that any dog attack is reported. It's always this like very passive language. It's very not incriminating towards the dog or these like terrorist soldiers that are using dogs against civilians. It's just absolutely infuriating.
I want to hear what the mother said, not your fucking shit about where they were. I don't give a shit if they were whoring in a bar outside or on Mars. They let the dog maul him. Do you fucking understand that? They took him, put him in a separate room and locked the door. So they let the dog tear him to shreds and then dumped him in a room and locked the door. We wanted to see what happened to him. We wanted to see Muhammad, to see what had become of him. They told us to be quiet and aimed their guns at us. So they just want to know what's happening with their family member who is autistic and has Down syndrome and has just been mauled. And the response from the Israelis is to point rifles in their faces. But they're the most moral army in the world, remember. They said, we will bring a military doctor to treat him. At one point, according to Nebula, a military doctor arrived and went into the room where Muhammad was lying. Muhammad's niece, who is 11, described how the family pleaded with soldiers to help him. We told them Muhammad was not well, but they kept saying he was fine. After several hours, it is not clear how many, the family was ordered at gunpoint to leave, leaving Muhammad behind with the soldiers. There were pleas, there were cries. 2 of his brothers were arrested by the army.
So these occupiers imported a dog, I assume, from the Netherlands that was trained and bred to maul and kill, unleashed it on civilians. It mauled a disabled autistic man with Down syndrome in front of his family. They pointed guns at the family and forced them to leave, and then arrested 2 of his brothers.
Have still not been released. The rest of the family found shelter in a bombed out building. So imagine these Israelis come into your house. In front of you, they let a dog maul your brother to death. And they then put him in a separate room where you can't see him or help him. And then when you try, they try to kick you out of your own house. And when you refuse because you want to take care of your brother, they arrest you and put you in jail for weeks, for months. That was on June 3rd, right? June 3rd, July 3rd, I forget the date. It's July. So for weeks now, right? You're put in jail because you don't want your brother to be mauled to death by a dog. Wow. They returned a week later to a site that haunts Muhammad's brother Jibril. He produces his mobile phone and shows our cameraman a video of the scene. Muhammad's body is lying on the floor. There is blood around him and a tourniquet on his arm. This was most probably used to stop heavy bleeding from his upper arm. Jibril.
They left him bleeding on the floor after they set their trained, weaponized dog on him. He's completely defenseless. They all are completely defenseless. They allowed the dog to essentially maul him to death and then left his bloody body laying on the floor.
He points to a gauze used to bandage a wound and remarks on the blood that clotted after the tourniquet was applied. They were trying to stop the bleeding, then they left him without stitches or care. Just, these basic first aid measures. Of course, as you can see, Muhammad was dead for a period of time already because he was abandoned. We thought he wasn't at home, but it turned out he had been bleeding and left alone at home all this time. Of course, the army left him. And then the BBC write, it is not clear.
This is maybe one of the most infuriating parts, and extremely reminiscent of what happens every single time we hear about dog attacks in this country. I've read so many articles multiple times where someone is mauled to death by dogs, and in the reporting on the incident, initially, it's always like, we don't know what exactly led to the death. We don't know which injury caused. Maybe it was a pre-existing condition. Like in the Annie Hornish case, they're still trying to claim that she died because she fell down and that the dog ripping, the flesh off of her legs was just incidental to her death, not the cause. So just strap in because things are about to get even more infuriating somehow.
What exact injury caused Muhammad's death. I mean, this makes me want to quit journalism, really. So there you see a video of his body The Israeli army tells you our dog mauled him. The family saw everything, and you don't know what killed him. Maybe it was a nuclear missile. I don't know. What do you think? How can you write? This is criminal. This is literally criminal, this sentence. You are covering up a fucking gang murder with an army dog. Literally criminal to write this. It's not clear. Jesus Christ. Muhammad was buried shortly after the family found him in an alley between houses because it was too dangerous to take the corpse to the mortuary or graveyard. There was no post-mortem and no certificate of death. Buried in an alley. When you read these kinds of things, there is no response except fuck the West. There is no response. The way that they killed him and the fact that he was buried, you know, in an alley without a death certificate, right? So, I mean, again, all of it is really horrific. It's really horrific, and they want to do this in order to terrify people and make us feel hopeless and that sort of thing. And yes, obviously it's awful that this happened to him. On the contrary, I'm the one. I'm the first to say it. You know, and the problem is they do this constantly to disabled people or people who are in need of who have special needs or who have people that care for them. It's really sadistic. This happened about 1 week before George Floyd was killed. All right. Iyad Hala was 32 years old, and the
last thing I want to talk about tonight is juxtaposing everything we've just covered with this article from 2016. Recall that at the same time this article was written, the occupation forces were importing attack dogs and using them on Palestinian children. Why Tel Aviv is so crazy about dogs? Tel Aviv Dog Festival displays high-tech and boutique products for pooches, highlights city's canine charms. It's not every day you see a dog getting a massage, but in this is not really city, somehow it seems expected. At Tel Aviv's first official dog festival, hundreds of dogs took over Yehoshua Park. I wonder what this was called. I wonder what Palestinian park or land or home this was before it was stolen and turned into a dog park. As canine customers wandered among vendors selling dog-related products and services, a DJ kept tails wagging with pop hits. This is going on while imported military attack dogs are being set on Palestinian children. One of the longest massages of the day went to a luxuriating yellow Labrador mix. Nearby, a pair of well-kept poodles snacked on maki tuna rolls and posed for professional photos. These people are feeding their dogs sushi while blockading food and aid from entering the largest open-air prison on Earth in an apartheid state. Leashed shoppers sampled organic gluten-free kibble, tried on boutique collars and leashes, and eyed bespoke dog tags and local dog themed art. This is depraved. Dog culture is depraved. And this is, to me, the most poignant example. Okay? This occupying force, this illegal, terroristic, occupying force that has stolen almost all of the land of Palestine from its indigenous population while it continues to terrorize and genocide what's left of them, is simultaneously importing dogs of war and occupation while also feeding the dogs gluten-free kibble and sushi and giving them massages. I feel like this is a humiliation ritual. Okay, this is a humiliation ritual. This is demonic. This is meant to cause untold psychological trauma. This is meant to just completely degrade human dignity. Orange Tel Aviv branded dog bowls were regularly refilled with bottled water, while human beings, okay, are struggle to get clean water to drink. Meanwhile, the dog's owners mingled and forked over the necessary shekels, seemingly unfazed by their reduced role in the whole affair. After all, Tel Aviv is a dog city. The reasons for that are both global and local. Quote, everywhere in the world is fighting for the creative class, and one of the ways to do that is to make life better for those in the city, Mira Marcus, Tel Aviv's international press director, told JTA. I think many creative people are dog owners. Many times when I walk into a startup company in Tel Aviv, there are dogs everywhere. It's very, very common for people to bring their dogs to work here. The city is estimated the city estimated it is home to 30,000 dogs, along with 413,000 people. Ahead of its dog festival called Kel Aviv, a portmanteau of Kelev, Hebrew for dog, and Tel Aviv, Tel Aviv declared itself the friendliest world city for dogs, with the most dogs per capita. Meanwhile, Israel is the number one cause of death for children in the world last year. Meanwhile, Israel has killed probably what, like 70,000 people, a large, I think the majority of which are children and women and civilians and innocent people. But dog forbid the dogs don't get fresh sushi. The most dogs per capita. More dogs per capita than New York City. Dogs crowd the streets of Tel Aviv, encouraged by its year-round sunshine and walkability. They're allowed in most cafes, stores, and even high-end restaurants, as well as on city buses and trains and in taxi vans. Tel Aviv boasts 70 dog parks and 4 dog beaches. The regular parks and legally dog-free beaches have their fair share of dogs too, many of them off-leash regardless of regulations. Yeah. This was the homeland of the Palestinian people. It has been stolen, illegally occupied, and turned into a dog city. True, most of Israel's nearly 400,000 dogs don't live in Tel Aviv. Most of them are being used to terrorize Palestinian civilians and guard illegal settlements. But like elsewhere in the world, an increasing number of Israelis are migrating to the city, and many of them want dogs. The number of dogs in Tel Aviv has more than tripled since 1996. Is not really experts on human-dog relations said the animals play the role of children in the lives of urban millennials who are waiting longer than ever to marry. For is not reallys, whose national culture has roots in the ethos of the kibbutz, dogs may also help ease the isolation of urban life. Do dogs ease the moral degradation that has to come with knowing that you are responsible for genociding a people? I wonder. We still have a very strong memory of our collectivist past, and dogs help us cope with the loneliness of the postmodern present and the international condemnation that comes from our genocidal actions towards Palestinians. We opened the apartment door to dogs and made them part of the family. People understand their dogs as their own children. Florencia Aventurini, a 27-year-old media manager, and Had Kashdan, a 31-year-old software engineer, each had a dog in tow at Tel Aviv. In the month the two Tel Avivians have been dating, their dogs Sandy and Chuni have been part of the relationship. Isn't that just precious? I grew up with a dog outside Tel Aviv and it was nice, but not the same. In Tel Aviv, you take your dog everywhere and he's part of your community. Thank God, thank dog, that the beautiful land of Palestine has been cleansed of its native inhabitants so that these two can have their dog children everywhere they go with them. Perhaps more than other urbanites, Tel Avivians demand that their dogs be accommodated. Businesses know borrowing dogs means losing business, and that they would likely hear about it on Facebook. It helps that Tel Aviv is an informal city in an informal country where t-shirts and sandals are appropriate attire at most restaurants, not to mention weddings. Even Hotel Montefiore, a premier local restaurant and hotel, welcomes dogs. Many businesses leave out bowls of water for thirsty dogs. Some go even further. Asaf Gorelick, 34, was at Tel Aviv with his girlfriend Dana Gallant and his two adopted dogs. I'm not even going to say their names. Gorelick owns a trendy Tel Aviv barbershop chain called Barbaria. Interesting. Where next month he will be selling posters of rescued pit bulls sitting in his retro barber chairs to raise money for a charity that rehabilitates the animals. This is going on while they are genociding a population of human beings. Is there anywhere in the world that you can point to where dog culture is more disgusting than this? I mean, the juxtaposition of this, Tel Aviv, with the fact that they are literally adjacent. They're on stolen land, first of all, adjacent to the largest open air prison in the world, where they are genociding a population of people for decades. And they're giving dogs sushi and bottled water while actual children starve to death. Intentionally, they intentionally block aid. They intentionally block the movement of food. They intentionally cut off water. They intentionally cut off power and electricity to a population of basically captive, 2 million captive Palestinians, while they feed the dogs sushi and bottled water and brag about being the most dog friendly city, the most dogs per capita in the world. I mean, I just feel like there's nothing more indicative of the true nature of dog culture and the true nature of this like illegal occupation. Dogs are an accepted part of Tel Aviv. When I leave the city, people are like, "What are you doing bringing dogs in here?" More and more Tel Aviv-based businesses exist specifically to serve dogs. You can't walk more than a few blocks in the city without coming across a pet store. Many such businesses were at Tel Aviv, including high-tech startups like Dogman, a fast-growing dog walking service that sends owners photographs of their dogs on WhatsApp, and Doggies, an app that helps owners find dog services in their neighborhood and lets them track walks in real time. The market is growing along with the urban population, Doggy's CEO Alon Zlatkin told JTA, noting there are now 6 dog walking and dog daycare companies in the city. Well, thank dog for that. Maybe once, they fully finish the genocide of the Palestinians, they can fill all of Gaza's beaches with dogs and dog parks and dog walking services. This is the most infuriating thing I can possibly imagine. Like, it makes me I it's hard to fathom that this is reality. This is like the worst dystopian movie that you could possibly imagine. Where were we? Our research shows millennials in Tel Aviv, as in Europe, well, that's because they're mostly European and American, but are more focused on their careers. Their dogs are like their kids, and they need a solution while they're working long hours. The city of Tel Aviv must answer to dog owners, too. Though there is more than one dog park there's more than one dog park every square kilometer. Some Tel Aviv residents complained they had to walk up to 15 minutes to reach one. Can you imagine? We stole all of this land from the Palestinians and we still had to walk 15 minutes to the dog park? They would like more greenery for their pooches to play in. Won't someone think of the Tel Avivians and their dogs? There's not enough greenery stolen from the Palestinians for them to play with their dogs in. They need more stolen land for their dogs to shit on. Others bemoaned the dog droppings on the streets. Dog issues have become part of political campaigns and municipal elections. Tel Aviv was the brainchild of Tal Hollander, a Tel Aviv resident who was in, I'm not saying it, the stolen land that used to belong to Palestinians and should be a park for Palestinian children to play in, with his dog when he was struck with inspiration. He contacted the city, which helped him plan the event over several months. This is so infuriating. I don't know if I can even make it through the rest of this. In 2017, the city plans to launch a service called DigiDog to give pet owners in Tel Aviv personalized updates on pet-friendly events and services, as well as deals from local pet companies. The service will be based on the city's award-winning Digitel service for human residents. I wonder how much of this technology was developed to monitor the human beings in Gaza who they're holding basically as prisoners on their own stolen land. It could be a new dog park that's opening up in your area. Once we steal some more land from the Palestinians, we can convert it into a dog park. It can be a reminder of your annual rabies shot that's mandatory. It can be a discount on dog food in a dog store in your area. Dogs also have cultural cachet in Tel Aviv. Rescuing them from shelters is a full-blown trend. Several shelters were represented at Tel Aviv, and at least 2 set up shop on the streets of the city every weekend, lining up dogs to be adopted or fostered, or to recruit donations and volunteers. In the Florentine neighborhood in South Stolen Land of Palestine, which many call the city's hippest enclave, the city estimated that every third person has a dog. Thank dog that this is what was able to be created after terrorizing, occupying, murdering, genociding, forcefully expelling, and destroying the lives of millions of Palestinian people. Thank dog that these Europeans can have every 1 out of 3 of them can have a dog. The rescue dog craze can be seen as part of the larger animal rights movement centered in Tel Aviv. Vegan activism, which in Is Not Real tends to highlight cruelty to animals while they continuously ignore the cruelty done to Palestinian people, is common on the streets of the city and on social media. Activists estimate 4% of Is Not Realies are vegans, a higher ratio than in any other country. New vegan and vegan-friendly restaurants pop up in Tel Aviv all the time. I hope there's vegan options for the dogs. People think we can't really do anything about all the horrible things that are going on around us, some of which we're partly responsible for. Wow, okay. Even if we become activists, helping Palestinians or whatever, it would be hard to make a change. In the political situation, Daphna Sher-Vertesh, an anthropologist who studies human-animal relations at Ben Gurion University, but maybe dog rights is our way of, we can't help those Palestinians or whatever, but maybe we can help dogs. By flaunting their dog friendliness, secular occupiers also distinguish themselves from Israel's poorest communities, Arabs and Haredi Orthodox Jews, for whom dog ownership is rare. That's partly because there are traditional taboos about dogs in both Judaism and Islam. But don't tell that to Agricultural Minister Yuri Ariel, a member of the religious Zionist Jewish Home Political Party's more religious faction. Along a doggy red carpet at Tel Aviv, where mutts and purebreds could strut their stuff, he was among the politicians who appeared on a series of posters promoting animal adoption. Hardcore religious Zionist Jewish Home Political Party Agricultural Minister Yuri Ariel appeared on the posters promoting dog adoption. That's truly amazing.